Good afternoon. It is Friday, April 1st, 2011, April Fool's Day. Well, I don't even know what to say about this new war in Libya. Obviously, if you've been keeping track of my video blogs in the past, you'll know that I'm opposed to it. I wanted to make a video blog last week, but I came down with the cold and my voice was really stuffy, so I didn't want to do that. Got a really bad haircut last week. I know it's off topic, but I don't like it this short, but gotta live with it. It's cool, whatever. But we're in a third war now. Bill Kristol, the editor of the National Review, which is a neoconservative magazine, very pro-Bush, pro-Cheney, came out the other day and congratulated Barack Obama on being a, quote, born-again neocon, end quote. Those were his words. And that's exactly what Obama has become. And those of us who warned Obama supporters prior to his election in 2008, for those of us, this is no surprise. We saw this coming. Obama ran as the peace candidate in 2008. If you were against war, you were supposed to vote for Obama. McCain was going to expected to continue the Bush policy of going around the world and bossing people around and being the policeman of the world and bombing civilians and so forth. Obama was supposed to end that. But instead what we have is, yeah, the America voted in the supposed peace candidate, but the wars have expanded as a result. It just goes to show that in this country we think we live in a democracy where we can choose the policies that we want, that the majority wants. And there's problems with democracy, and I've made past blogs about that. You can look that up. But this is not a democracy. There's a continuity of agenda here. The last several presidents, going back before Bush, have been pro-war, pro-corporate welfare, just across the board have, by and large, agreed on the main issues and disagreed on more minor ones. But back to the war. Just total hypocrisy by the United States. This is a so-called humanitarian mission. But yet, what are our allies doing in the Middle East? I got some news stories here. Saudi Arabia, one of our biggest allies in the Middle East. This is from a couple weeks ago. Protests in Saudi Arabia turned violent when police officers opened fire on marchers. So are we going to have a no-fly zone over Saudi Arabia and start bombing Saudi Arabia? No, because they are our ally. Got another U.S. ally in the Middle East. This is from last week. Bahrain. Small protests broke out in Bahrain's capital for a planned day of rage today, despite a ban under martial law. So that country, martial law has banned all demonstrations in that country, our ally. Police fired rounds of tear gas to disperse the 100 protesters, and so on and so on. Several people died. I mean, but it's good when they do it. It's bad when Gaddafi does it, because Gaddafi's not our ally. He's not a puppet of the United States or of the Western powers. Then we've got European governments. European governments have continually tear gas protesters. In fact, it happened earlier this month in Belgium. In Greece, when they were protesting a bank bailout, rightly so, they should have been. The police were very brutal to those protesters. In Brazil, earlier in the month, actually, yeah, Obama starts a new war, but he's not even in the United States. He's in Brazil. Obama had to cancel one of his public appearances because there were so many Obama protesters in Brazil, and the protests got so large that the police in Brazil had to fire rubber bullets on the crowd. But that's good because they were protesting Obama. If they're protesting Gaddafi or a non-ally, then that would have been bad, and then we would have had to go on a humanitarian mission. Egypt has banned protests. People have acted like this Egypt conflict has brought democracy to Egypt. No, I mean, Mubarak was an awful guy, but in Egypt, right now we have a military junta that's in charge. elections have been postponed to the fall, and the two candidates up for election are largely Western-backed. Protests and demonstrations have been completely banned in Egypt. I've got news here. This is from the UK Telegraph. This is from a few weeks ago. Egypt's army imposed martial law yesterday. This is after this is after Mubarak is gone. This is the so-called victorious revolution in Egypt. Less than 48 hours after President Mubarak was forced out, military leaders suspended the constitution and dissolved parliament. Today, they are set to ban trade union strikes. So all of these countries across the Middle East are doing things like this, who are our allies, and yet we pick and choose and say, Libya does it, they're bad, we need to attack, we need to bomb, we need to get rid of Gaddafi. And now there's talk about Syria. Syria has had protests as well. Syria is not our ally, so I wouldn't be surprised if we go into Syria on a humanitarian mission. We'll see, we might not. But it's just total hypocrisy. And Gaddafi made a good point, and I do not like Gaddafi, of course. If you've been keeping track of my blogs, you know I'm a lover of freedom and a lover of liberty. Dictatorships do not sit very kindly with me. But Gaddafi made a good point. He called Obama his son, which I thought was a good touch. Gaddafi said, you know, if this was going on in your country, Obama, and there were massive protests storming the Capitol, threatening to overturn the United States government, what would the U.S. military do? The U.S. military would just open fire, machine gun the crowd. I mean, there's no doubt about that. The United States government would not allow a demonstration in this country to take over the government. No doubt about that. But it's just so humanitarian. This is not humanitarian. And the United States is involved in so many practices that are the opposite of humanitarianism. When we drop bombs in Afghanistan and Pakistan that are supposed to target someone in Al-Qaeda, and it ends up killing 100 civilians, that's declared to be okay because they say, well, yeah, we killed 100 civilians, but we killed one Al-Qaeda, so that was worth it. That's terrorism too, United States. So just total hypocrisy. But who are the rebels against Gaddafi? Well, a lot of them are Al-Qaeda, not all of them. But I got some news here. This came out a couple days ago. This is on CBS News. NATO, signs of Al-Qaeda presence in Libyan rebels. Another one here. This is from the Washington Times. Al-Qaeda offers aid to rebels in Libya. Al-Qaeda's North African affiliate publicly offered its assistance and support to rebels in Libya who are fighting to wrest control of the country from Colonel Gaddafi. So we've got Al-Qaeda, and we're giving arms to the rebels, so we're essentially giving arms to Al-Qaeda. It's unbelievable. This is so Orwellian. If you've read 1984, Orwell talked about, or the government in 1984, one day they would say, we've always been at war with East Asia. Then the next day, we've never been at war with East Asia. I mean, we're seeing that come true now in the United States. One moment, Al-Qaeda is the absolute devil, and we need the boogeyman, and we need to do everything we can to stop them. And then the next minute, they're the good guys, and if you are against the rebels, you're un-American. So all of a sudden, if you're against Al-Qaeda, you're un-American. Unbelievable. So Orwellian. And speaking of Orwell, Obama calling this is obviously a war, he's calling it a kinetic military action. Yeah, if you haven't read 1984, you need to do it, because I mean, it's people have said it's like it's a playbook that all of what these governments have been doing. So the rebels, we got Al-Qaeda among the rebels. Not all of them. There are people legitimately against Gaddafi. Of course, he's a dictator. But why would Al-Qaeda be against Gaddafi? Gaddafi has a secular government. Muslim radicals want a theocracy. Gaddafi has a secular government. Saddam Hussein had bad guy, dictator, but it was a secular government. So of course Al-Qaeda is going to, and Muslim radicals are going to love to see a secular Arab country go down. A lot of these, I mean, this is just unbelievable. A lot of these rebels are violent racist against black people. I've got sources here on that. These Libyan rebels. Here we go. Rebel forces are detaining anyone suspected of serving or assisting the Gaddafi regime, locking them up in the same prisons once used to detain and torture Gaddafi's opponents. For a month, gangs of young gunmen among the rebels have roamed the city, rousting Libyan blacks and immigrants from sub-Saharan Africa from their homes and holding them for interrogation as suspected mercenaries or government spies. Another source is from the United Nations, surprisingly enough, the UN Refugee Agency, and they're talking about how sub-Saharan Africans, dark-skinned Africans, because remember, Libya, you've got some sub-Saharan Africa, which is more dark-skinned, then you've got the northern half, which is more light-skinned, and these rebels are racist. So Obama is helping out, not only is Obama selling out his country, he's selling out his race, too, by helping out these people, who are against black people. And of course, the rebels are Western-backed. They're getting arms from the West. It seems like they've been provoked by the West. So why would the United States want to invade Libya? Why, or the West, rather? I mean, because Britain and France are involved as well. Why is the West so interested in Libya? I think there's multiple factors. For one, Gaddafi, even though he's a dictator, he's autonomous. He's not a puppet for the West. Sort of like Ahmadinejad, no matter what you think of him, the West doesn't control him. The West does control the Saudis, of course the new Afghanistan government, Iraq, and so on. Egypt for a long time under Mubarak. Mubarak got tons of aid, billions of dollars of aid from the United States. But Libya, what is Libya? Let's look at just the facts here. Libya possesses more oil than any other country in Africa. Is that a coincidence? Why did we not invade Rwanda even though there was total genocide in Rwanda? 1 million people were killed, roughly. In Sudan, Darfur, same story. We didn't invade there. But for some reason, we choose Libya. Libya just happens to have more oil than any other country in Africa. What a coincidence. You know, and by the way, Iraq also had the world's second largest oil reserves. Second largest in the entire world in oil reserves. Iraq. We just happened to invade. Oh, what a coincidence. Gaddafi's government has 140 tons of gold. That's a lot of money. 140 tons. Libya has a very strategic location. It's not just in the middle of nowhere. It's along the Mediterranean Sea. Very nice location. But yeah, you got to look at the resources of a country and consider that as a motive. It might not be the only motive, but it has to be a motive. If you look at Afghanistan, Afghanistan produces 92% of the world's opium. And you're like, well, the troops aren't. America isn't taking that opium. Of course they are. There's pictures of United States troops protecting opium fields in Afghanistan. They're taking the money. They're involved in the opium trade in Afghanistan. I have a friend in the military. Okay, I'm not going to say his name, but I have a friend in the military, and I've talked to him, and he's like, John, we are definitely engaged in the opium trade in Afghanistan. No doubt about it. He said, I've seen it. I'm on Wikipedia here. Opium production in Afghanistan has been on a rise since U.S. occupation started in 2001. See, the Taliban was against opium because it was against their religion. No matter what you think of the Taliban, they were against the production of opium. There has been more opium poppy cultivation in each of the past 4 growing seasons than in any one year during Taliban rule. I mean, how much more evidence do you need that we are not in there for the reasons we state? All right, last little bit, and this to me is some of the most offensive stuff, but the way in which Obama has gone to war, completely subverted the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution states that only Congress can declare war. It's explicit. We haven't declared war since World War II. And a lot of people that use that as an excuse, well, we haven't done it since World War II. It doesn't make it right. That is there for a reason. See, the founders considered, well, the founders, of course, the whole concept of checks and balances, no one branch should be more powerful than the other. But the founders considered Congress, out of all 3 branches, to be the most important, because it was the people's branch. The judiciary The judiciary is not elected by people, and the executive is not elected by the people. They're elected by the Electoral College. And originally the Senate was elected by the state legislatures, which was a better system. That's an entirely different topic. But Congress is the people's branch. Only Congress can declare war. That's therefore a good reason. We don't want the executive to be the one that decides whether or not we go to war. It wasn't meant to be that way. There's a reason why the founders put Article 1, Section 8 in the Constitution. That was a very wise move on their part, and unfortunately we've completely neglected that. But it's amazing because in the 2000s, Barack Obama said that Bush needed to get authorization from Congress. He needed to get a declaration of war. Joe Biden, and you've probably seen this clip, Joe Biden said if George W. Bush invades Iran without a declaration from Congress, I'm going to move to impeach him. And then they get to office and they do even worse. See, at least Bush, back in the closing months of 2002, got authorization from Congress to use force. It was still unconstitutional and illegal because Congress needed to declare war and they didn't do so. But at least Bush did that much. Obama didn't even do that. He just said, forget it, Congress is ceremonial, I'm not even going to bother. And he said, I got a UN mandate, so I'm going to do it. But the UN does not override the Constitution. It can't. It's not allowed to. The Constitution state, I forget which article it is, but I know it's in there. Constitution states that no treaty can be above that. The Constitution is the law of the land. It doesn't matter what the UN says. If the UN passes a resolution saying no more free speech, I mean, is that an excuse to go ahead and ban free speech in America? The UN said it, right? No, the Constitution is the law of the land, period. But I'm not surprised by this fact, but it's so shameful how John Boehner, what a coward that guy is. He hasn't spoken up at all about this illegal war. Hardly. I mean, he said, well, the president should communicate it better. No, John Boehner, the president should have gotten a declaration of war. See, John Boehner poses as this constitutional Tea Partier, but yeah, when push comes to shove, he's not standing up for the Constitution. Neither is Michelle Bachmann. Nothing from Michelle Bachmann about how this is unconstitutional. Why? Why aren't these so-called constitutionalists not speaking up? The only ones I hear speaking up, of course, Ron Paul, Rand Paul, and Dennis Kucinich. Maybe, I think Mike Lee, who's a Tea Party senator from Utah, and a few other Democrats here and there. But everyone else is on board with this conflict. They're either saying Obama's doing a great job, or they're saying Obama's not doing enough. They want even more force. But, you know, where are we getting this money from? And I mean, it's just absurd. Last point, I know this is a long blog. YouTube's allowing me to do longer videos now. So that might annoy some of you, but hey, you know, I'm going to do it. Last point, it really sickens me how hypocritical Obama supporters have been in the last month. I was already sickened by the fact that they haven't called out Obama for continuing the bombings, continuing the wars in the Middle East. But now that Obama started a new war, almost all of his supporters, I've seen a few dissenters, Kucinich, and a few others, but almost all Obama supporters in the public, in Congress, are totally on board with this. Or they are hesitant in their criticism. They're criticizing a little bit. Yeah, he should have maybe gotten more permission from Congress, but you could tell they don't want to criticize Obama too much. They're playing that stupid blue team versus red team game. Their team is Team Blue, so they don't want to criticize Team Blue too much, because if they criticize Team Blue, Team Red might win in the next election. It's just total ridiculousness. But the Obama supporters are totally fine with this new war. Of course, if this was John McCain who did this in the same exact way, they would be up in arms, there would be protests in D.C., but because Team Blue is doing it, they're totally fine with it. And of course, I can't just pick on them. I got to pick on conservatives a little bit too, because this happened under you. In the 1990s, conservatives talked. I remember when I was a kid. I remember hear conservatives talk about, hey, we shouldn't be policemen of the world, and then Bush comes in power, and they're totally fine with going around the world on humanitarian missions, so to speak, and bombing and taking over countries. It's just total hypocrisy on both sides. I'm sick of it. But anyway, I've run way too long. Lots to talk about here. This is really important. Hopefully this war doesn't last too long. I hope there isn't a ground invasion. My gut instinct tells me there will be. We already have CIA agents there, so technically we have invaded. But just a full-on force in Libya, I don't know yet. I hope not. We'll just have to see what happens. But anyway, thanks for paying attention, and thanks for sticking with me all 20 minutes, and I'll see you next time. Bye.